Hello, true crimerers. Testing out a new greeting. How do you like it? That was awful. I will never do that again. Anyway, kids, they're demons. Literally all of them. Not one child on this planet is not a demon. But in particular, these 26 kids are, well, they're Satan's minions, pretty much. This will be another TikTok compilation video. You should be used to these by now. If you're not, I'm trying to get as many of my videos from TikTok over here as possible before TikTok takes my page away on the permanent status for the third time. So this is going to be a video where kids are the main suspect. Yeah, kids are killers too. These little hell spawns, I believe all of them are under the age of 18, who have gone on to murder either another child, teenager, or adults. Yeah, because... So, without further ado, here are 26 cases where kids are the murderers. Viewer discretion is advised. Stop doing new things, okay. For me, this image that you are currently staring at is still one of the most haunting images I have ever seen. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of James Bulger. Viewer discretion is advised. And yes, this is a redo. I made a series of videos that I'm now going to put into one. And trigger warning, if you've never heard James's story, this one is really bad. James was a 2-year-old boy from Liverpool, England. On the afternoon of February 12, 1993, James and his mother Denise were at the Strand shopping mall in Liverpool. Denise had gone into a butcher shop with James in hand, and for literally just a few brief moments, she had let go of his hand and got distracted by the butcher, and then a few moments later she turns around and James is gone. She searches the whole butcher store. He's not there. She's looking everywhere outside the butcher shop. He's not there. She informs mall security immediately and they check CCTV footage. And that is when this image is found. At 3:42 p.m., 2-year-old James Bulger is holding the hand of an unknown person. This is the final image of James alive. 2 days later, on a nearby train track, 2 young students would discover the body of James Bulger. James's body had been severed by the train. The coroner would rule that James was deceased before the train hit him. James only had a shirt on and everything else was removed. Trigger warning, I'm about to go into detail as to what happened to James. This is based on the autopsy and what the eventual confessions would say. James had been dropped on his head. He received many facial injuries. This little boy had paint thrown in his eyes. He had bricks thrown and dropped on him. He was kicked at full force many times. He had a bunch of batteries shoved into his mouth. He had a 10-kilogram iron bar dropped on his head and had 10 skull fractures. His foreskin had been forcibly pulled back, and it's possible he also had items put up his rectum. He was placed onto the train tracks where his head was weighed down with a block when the train hit him and severed him. The CCTV footage provided the assailants. 2 10-year-old boys, Robert Thompson and John Venables. They were questioned for hours and hours. They blamed each other, passed guilt around. They denied it, then they admitted it. Forensic evidence, including paint samples, tied both boys to the murder. They also had James's DNA on one of their boots. They allegedly tried and failed to do the same to other boys. Because of their age, they only got sentenced to 8 years each. Both were released in 2001. One of them has still been in and out of jail, but their new identities are secret. A traditional Halloween prank would go terribly wrong, and a man would be murdered. Hello, true crimerers. This is another deadly Halloween. Viewer discretion is advised. Okay, enough of that face from hell. This was 21-year-old Carl Jackson. This is a photograph he had taken with his mother just outside of Red Lobster weeks before this story would take place, celebrating his birthday. He lived in the Bronx, New York, and he was a data entry clerk. He and his girlfriend had a young son. Everything was going wonderful in his life. He was described as a good father, a good man, and just wanted to do right by everyone. On Halloween night 1998, a prank would go wrong. On that night, Carl and his girlfriend would go pick up their son from a Halloween party. While parked outside of the place they were picking their son up from, a group of teenagers came by and began egging their car. Carl Jackson saw this and he was not very happy. In fact, he started arguing with the teenagers. But after a few moments, Carl got back into his car. And then one of the teenagers, a 17-year-old named Curtis Sterling, who I cannot find a picture of him, pulled out a handgun and shot Carl Jackson once through the head, killing him instantly. Because at the time of the murder he was a minor, Curtis Jackson was given just a 20-year jail sentence for deliberately, knowingly, with perfect understanding of what he was about to do, shot a man in the head, killing him. But because he was 17 years old, let's let him off a little bit easy, give him 20 years. Carl Jackson's mother, Gloria, pictured here, every single year that young man was in prison, she did something kind of cool. Every Halloween, she would send him a Halloween-themed card that simply said, "I'm glad you're still there." It's subtle, but pretty badass as well. I can't seem to find anywhere, though, if he has been released from jail or not, because right around now would be about 20 years. I sure hope he had fun in prison. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of 16-year-old David Grunwald. On the night of November 13th, 2016, Ben Grunwald, who is David's father, would call Alaskan state troopers to report his son missing. David was supposed to just be driving his girlfriend home and then come back, but when he didn't, his father would say this is very unusual, he usually always comes back or at least calls. Well, apparently after dropping off his girlfriend, David would go to the home of a friend, Eric Elmendinger. David, Eric, and others were in a 1971 camper on his property, and they were smoking the devil's lettuce. Can I say the real word? I don't know on here. They were also getting drunk. But David still never came home, so the search began. The very next morning, they would discover that David's truck had been burned, and David was still missing. Now, police found Eric a couple days later and said, "Hey, what the hell, where is David?" He would say, "I haven't seen David in weeks." He said he went to a party in Anchorage, Alaska the night that David went missing. Except, hi, everyone, cell phones, tablets, computers, yeah, they tell the truth. His electronic devices would tell another story. He was with and next to David that night. They then searched his camper and it smelled horrifically like bleach. And then they would find blood in the camper as well. 19 days after David went missing, they would recover his body. He would be found off Knik River Road, and he had bullet wounds in his head. So Eric would then confess to being involved in the murder of David Grunwald. What was his motivation? What was the reason? Well, David smoked the rest of his pot. So, you know, what's the logical step you take? Well, it turns out it wasn't just Eric involved. It was also Austin Barrett, Dominic Johnson, and Bradley Renfro. Wasn't Bradley Renfro an actor? I think he died too. Anyway. So the group pistol-whipped David, bludgeoned him several times, forced him into his own Ford Bronco, drove him out to the Knik River Road wooded area, made him go to his knees, and they shot him execution style. Through warrants, they were able to obtain a whole bunch of their electronic device records, and they could tie these teenagers to the death of David Grunwald. For something as allegedly stupid as smoking all of the ganja? What is wrong with people on this planet? Anyway, all of them were found guilty of first-degree murder. Austin Barrett got 45 years. Dominic Johnson was sentenced to 99 years. Bradley Renfro and Eric Elmendinger are still awaiting their sentences. The pandemic delayed it. None of them should ever be allowed to walk free again. Just saying. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Shanda Scherer. Shanda was born on June 6, 1979, and she lived with her parents in Madison, Indiana. but her life would come to a tragic end at the age of 12. Let's go back a bit. This is 16-year-old Melinda Lovelace. In 1990, she began to have a relationship with another girl named Amanda Heverin. About a year into their relationship, Melinda would try coming out to her mother. At first, her mom was totally against it, but then eventually she learned to be okay with it. After she came out, the relationship she had with Amanda began to just kind of fizzle out, and she ended up dating a slightly older girl. 12-year-old Shanda would meet Amanda Heverin after the two of them got into a fight and shared detention together. Well, that turned out to be some form of meet-cute, because they grew into a relationship themselves. Until Melinda noticed, and she became extremely jealous, even though they weren't really a couple anymore. When she found out, she and her friends began to taunt Shanda Scherer and bully her. In October of 91, she then saw Shanda with Amanda at a festival. This enraged her. She would tell her friends, "I want to kill Shanda Scherer." She even threatened her at school and out in public. She wrote letters to Amanda Heverin, threatening her. Amanda turned those notes into authorities, but they didn't do anything about it, allegedly. January 10th, 1992. Melinda would turn her threats into reality. Alongside her friend Lori Tackett, Hope Rippey, and Tony Lawrence. The four scumbags devised a ruse that they would lure Shanda Scherer out of her house under the guise that Amanda Heverin wanted to meet her and them at a place known as the Witch's Castle, also known in the area as Mistletoe Falls. Their plan worked. Two of the girls managed to get Shanda in the car while Melinda was hiding in the very back under a blanket. Melinda was apparently chomping at the bits to kill Shanda. Shanda realized she was lied to when Amanda wasn't there. When they got there, they tied her up. They started making fun of her, took all of her jewelry off of her, made her strip naked, said the castle was full of bodies and she was going to be next. They then took her back to the car and drove her to a garbage dump. They tried cutting her throat, but the knife was too dull. Melinda and Lori then took turns stabbing her in the chest. They strangled her with a rope until she passed out. They tortured her. They then drove her to a gas station where they got gas, brought her to this field, poured gasoline on her, and lit her on fire. They also beat her in the head with a tire iron and watched the still living Shanda burn to death. The four girls then went to McDonald's, ate, and laughed. To cut it short, they all got arrested, they all got convicted of her murder, they got short sentences, and as of now, they're all free. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of 13-year-old Eric Smith. And, shit, I gotta do it. I'm not proud of this. God! Anyway, let's get serious. Eric here was born on January 22nd, 1980 in Steuben County, New York. He was described as being, like a funny kid. He loved goofing around, having a good old time, but he would be diagnosed with something called intermittent explosive disorder. Essentially, it's a disorder that would cause people to be extremely violent very randomly. Some would question if this is really something that happens in children, but that would be questioned a little bit later on in the story. August 2nd, 1993. Eric was on his way home from a day camp that he was hanging out at. He was actually instructed to leave by the adults there because he was being, disruptive, mean. He was being a bully. Now, he too was also bullied a ton. Trust me, back in the 90s, if you have, really red hair like he does, the glasses he wears, yeah, he would have gotten picked on a lot, unfortunately. On his way home, he would pass by 4-year-old Derek Roby. Derek was walking by himself, which I'm sorry to the parents, but I don't understand why. He was 4 years old. But he was walking by himself to that day camp that Eric had just been kicked out of. Eric would lure the 4-year-old boy to a secluded wooded area where, for some unknown reason, Eric strangled the 4-year-old. He then dropped a very large rock onto Derek's head, which caused extreme blunt force trauma and the 4-year-old boy died. The coroner would rule that he died of blunt force trauma and asphyxia. 4 hours later, after searching for him everywhere, Derek's mother would find her son's dead body. About a week later, on August 8th, Eric would confess to his mother that he was the one to kill the young boy. He also admitted, viewer discretion advised on this next part, he inserted a stick into Derek in his bottom to ensure he was dead. Eric was convicted. In 1994, he was sentenced to 9 years to life. And to my surprise, oh my god, it's Adam Savage. He's still in prison. He's failed 10 times to get paroled. Hello, true crimerers. I wanted to give you a little case update. Sadly, I can't link you to my original video about this young man, because my main account is gone forever. But problem child himself, little Eric Smith, well, he's not so little anymore. He's now 41 years old. When he was 13, he bludgeoned a 4-year-old child to death, and this was in New York. He appeared before the parole board 10 previous times and was always denied. But you know what they say, 11th time is the charm. He has been paroled. He will be released from prison sometime as early as November 17th, 2021. God, I gotta be honest with you, I really think that was a bad call. What he did to that little boy, I don't know if that kind of behavior leaves. I guess time will tell. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Melanie Ritchie. Viewer discretion is advised. And also, I don't really have much imagery for this case because there isn't any that I can find. This was 15-year-old Melanie Ritchie, and this case takes place in South Carolina. On July 11th, 1994, Melanie snuck out of her home to go meet some friends. When she snuck out of the home, she cut her foot a little bit. Around this same time, 16-year-old Joseph Kelsey and Jeffrey Payne, well, they were home alone, and so they decided to craft some pipe bombs. They set a few off, made some craters in the ground, harmless. So they said, let's build some more. So they went out and bought better gear to make pipe bombs with. So they built some more, and then they went over to a friend's house, Mike Kirchner, for a house party. At around midnight, Jeffrey Payne and friend Jamie Lynn Lee left the party to go to a convenience store where a bunch of the teens would hang out, I guess. And that is when they ran into Melanie Ritchie. They noticed something was wrong with her foot because, again, she cut it when she was sneaking out of her home. So Lee and Payne said, all right, we'll take you back to our friend Mike Kirchner's house where we're having a party, and we'll bandage up your foot for you. And she went along. They got back to the house around 1:30 in the morning. And they bandaged her foot up, and they all went back to the party. A little bit later on, Ritchie was outside of the house, and so Jeffrey Payne went out there, and, well, he made some passes at her, and he tried to get her to make love. But she continually rejected him. Good on you, girl. Well, apparently that really pissed off Jeffrey Payne. In fact, Joseph Kelsey would even say at one point he heard Payne say, I could just kill her. So, Gregory Payne made Joseph Kelsey crush up ecstasy and pour it into a drink that they would then give to Melanie. Around 3:30 in the morning, they told Kelsey, all right, we'll take you home now. Gregory Payne asked Jamie Lynn Lee to grab something to knock Ritchie out with, so he grabbed a wrench. And they also took the unexploded pipe bombs. At some point in the ride, Ritchie had done something to piss off Gregory Payne, so he put her in a chokehold, and then allegedly hit her with the wrench. They then parked under a bridge. Gregory told the other two boys to get out of the car when Payne allegedly sexually assaulted Ritchie. They would throw Melanie Ritchie out of the car when Gregory had Joseph put an unexploded pipe bomb into Ritchie's mouth. They lit the fuse and they bolted, and they heard it explode. The two boys were very quickly arrested for her murder, and both Payne and Kelsey were convicted and both sentenced to life in prison. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of high school teacher Colleen Ritzer. Colleen was a 24-year-old math teacher at Danvers High School. She specifically taught geometry and algebra. And Danvers High School is located in Boston, Massachusetts. Now, Miss Ritzer was a very popular teacher there. She was beloved by students. She would actually stay after school to help coach students, talk to students, whatever she needed to do. But she was known to always be on the student side. On October 22nd, 2013, she asked one of her new students, 14-year-old Philip Chisholm, to stay after school. She just wanted to have kind of like an introductory talk with him, and he was super shy. He had recently moved to Boston from the Tennessee area. Allegedly, when Mrs. Ritzer started bringing up Tennessee, Philip, for some reason, got really upset about it. So the other student who was in the room at the time alleges that she stopped the conversation on Tennessee and tried to change subjects. Just before 3 p.m. on that October afternoon, Mrs. Ritzer got up to use the restroom, and this is the CCTV footage of her doing that. As a matter of fact, let me just show you the footage. Nothing about this is graphic, don't worry. Okay, so there she is walking towards the women's room, and here in just a moment, there is Philip, seeing where she went. So I guess right here he recognizes that there is a camera, and he attempts to disguise himself by putting a hood on. That's not going to work. Now he goes towards the women's room. You can see him here putting on gloves. Now, sometime later, you see him walking out with a garbage bin and a mask on. He then puts on a red jacket and heads towards the exit. So, trigger warning, I'm about to describe something graphic, so just a heads up. Okay. He would startle Colleen and then took out a box cutter and slashed her throat 16 times. Now, they believe she was still alive when he then sexually assaulted her. He brought a change of clothes with him to school that day, so he planned this. So this is the garbage bin in evidence. He wheeled her out to the woods and dumped her. Again, they allege she's still alive. Again, another trigger warning. He then takes a tree branch and he inserts it into her and poses her in a sexually humiliating position. And then she dies. He then dumped a note on her body that said, "I hate you all." Philip stole her credit card, then went to go get fast food and watched a movie. He was found by police sometime after midnight that night, when they found the bloody evidence in his backpack. In 2014, while awaiting trial, he attacked another woman in the youth facility prison he was in. In 2016, he was convicted and sentenced to 40 years in prison. Should have gotten life.
What is your emergency? There's blood all over the place. I just got assaulted and jumped. Are you the one that got stabbed? No, that was the other victim, but I got beat up really bad and I had blood all over me.
That is the voice of 18-year-old Zachary Latham, someone you may have heard of, because he was a TikToker on the rise. He started to get TikTok clout after a series of videos he posted of him arguing with a neighbor he would label a Karen. Her name is Catherine Durham. This is her husband, William Durham. She had issues with the way Zachary was driving through the neighborhood, saying his car was a disturbance, and Zachary had fun with it. Unfortunately, on May 4th, 2020, this little rivalry became deadly. Tensions were inflamed and a brawl broke out in the Durham garage. And when the dust settled, William Durham had been fatally stabbed by Latham. Latham was charged with manslaughter, and authorities revealed he did not go over there with intent to kill. In fact, both sides have charges against him. Latham would get in trouble when he tried to make another TikTok account to get clout off the killing. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Alex Mercado. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. This one is obviously about a very young child. Alex was born on July 19th, 2005, and he lived with his family in Mendota, California. His family described him as fun, a little ball of energy. He loved to play with cars and action figures in the sandbox. He loved riding his bike. He loved SpongeBob and Spider-Man. His favorite music artist was Soulja Boy. His dad was his best friend. They loved to joke and laugh. He learned how to swim at a very young age, and it was one of his favorite activities. But sadly, he would only ever get to experience all of that for just a very short 4 years. On the afternoon of October 30th, 2009, the 4-year-old boy, Alex, was outside playing. And then, seemingly in an instant, he was gone. Somehow he vanished. His parents went around the neighborhood looking for him. They got friends and family to help. And very quickly they reported him missing to the local police, and an Amber Alert had gone out immediately. They searched throughout the rest of the afternoon. They searched overnight with flashlights, and they couldn't find him. They looked everywhere. It would turn out that Alex was never very far away at all. This is 13-year-old Raul Castro. He was the next-door neighbor to the Mercado family. After not being able to find Alex sort of anywhere in the surrounding areas, they began to go house to house in the neighborhood, searching top to bottom. On October 31st, 2009, Raul's mother would let out a blood-curdling scream. She had found Alex. Alex, he was stuffed inside the clothes dryer of the Castro family. Alex was deceased. So they questioned the people in the Castro home, including the 13-year-old neighbor boy. He confessed to killing Alex. He said on the afternoon of October 30th, he saw Alex outside playing alone, and he managed to lure him inside their home. And for whatever motives he had, he sexually assaulted Alex. When he was done, Alex said, "I'm gonna go tell my mom on you." So Raul decided to silence Alex. He filled his bathtub up with water, placed Alex inside, and then laid on top of him so that he would drown, which is what happened. He then put him in the clothes dryer with other items to hide him. So obviously Raul was arrested and charged with the murder. He was tried as an adult, thankfully. He was convicted and sentenced to 33 years to life. Later, the courts would reduce it to 25 years to life, and Alex is memorialized in the neighborhood. This is the case of 16-year-old Lori Show. Lori was a sophomore at Conestoga Valley High School in the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area. They probably butchered that school name. God, I really wish we still had this type of hair, you know? Just business up front and just fucking party everywhere else. In the summer of 1991, Lori here had a little fling with Holy Mulletsville. I'll give you 3 guesses what his name is. Yep, Butch. Lawrence Butch Yunkin. I wouldn't go out in public looking like that, I'm just saying. You see, Butchie Boy here was also dating Lisa Michelle Lambert. God, if looks could kill. And weapons. Weapons could kill, which she will use later. By the way, Mullet Boy here was a little bit older than all of them. He was a high school dropout and... shocker, I know, with that hair. High school dropout? Are you kidding me? That's unusual. Anywho, Lambert here began to harass Lori Show, to bully her profusely. All because Lori had gone on a few dates with her ex-boyfriend, Butchie. Lori would also tell her mother at one point that Butch sexually assaulted her. I can't say the word. So that caused an obvious rift with Lori, so, the two of them didn't see each other anymore. And soon after this, he started dating Lambert again. Oh, and he impregnated Lambert. Oh, God, I hope he doesn't get your hair. Oh, my God. But Lisa Lambert here still couldn't let it go. She had to continue to harass Lori Show. She would go into her work and harass her. Witnesses said they would actually hear Lisa say that she intended to scare Lori, then hurt Lori, then slit her throat. Well, on December 20th, 1991, Lori Show's mother would come home to find that her daughter was murdered. She had received a 5-inch gash to her neck. Her lung was also punctured by a stab wound. Another stab mark punctured her spine, plus several stab wounds to the head, and defensive marks on her hands. Lisa Lambert and her friend, goddamn the hair, Tabitha Buck, called Lori's mother ahead of time to lure her out of the house, pretending to be a school counselor that needed to talk to her about Lori. And the ploy worked. Apparently when Lori's mother got home and saw her daughter stabbed, she was still alive for a very brief moment, and she named Lisa Lambert as her killer. Now, Captain Hair Murder over here, he dropped the 2 girls off at the show home and said he did not participate in the murder, but he was aware of what they were going to do. Police arrested all 3 later that same day. Both Lisa Lambert and Hair Catastrophe Tabitha Buck were both convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Butch received a lesser sentence and was paroled in 2003. This is the final image of a young girl who would be lured to her death just minutes after this photo was taken. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Maddie Middleton. Viewer discretion is advised. Pictured here as the Tannery Arts Center apartment complex in Santa Cruz, California. Living there was 8-year-old Madison Middleton with her family. Maddie's mom would say about her that she was growing up beautifully. She was bright, perky, and fun. She was generous at heart. It was a joy to be around her, and she's absolutely irreplaceable. On July 25th, 2015, Maddie would ask her mom if she could go outside and play around on her scooter, and her mom said, yeah, that's fine. But Maddie never came back home. Just like that, she was gone. After searching around the entire complex, they would call police and report their daughter as missing. Police would search the area, and they would also look at CCTV footage, and they caught Madison riding her scooter in this area. This is that image. Now, they don't capture what happens to her on here, but this helps tell them that she was on the property when she went missing. The FBI was called in. They would go door to door searching every apartment. They would, of course, search around outside the property, but they never came up with anything. That is until they saw something else on footage. I don't have the image of that particular CCTV footage, but 15-year-old Adrian Gonzalez, who lived in the same exact apartment complex, was seen throwing something in a nearby dumpster. This dumpster, to be exact. When police opened this dumpster, they found the body of 8-year-old Madison Middleton. She had been duct taped, and the autopsy would show that she was sexually assaulted, strangled, and stabbed. Police would bring the 15-year-old Adrian Gonzalez in for questioning. He was known as a pretty just quiet, reserved kid around the complex. He was always outside showing kids how to yo-yo. He was also considered a overly emotional young man. He had thoughts of ending his own life, and when police questioned him, he just confessed to doing it all. His defense would not deny that he killed the girl. They would lay out this defense as if he is just this troubled young man, but he could be fixed. He could be helped. He killed her because he wanted to end his own life, but he wanted to see how people would react first. The courts tried to try him as an adult, but thanks to laws, he was tried as a juvenile, even though he knew exactly what he was doing. So he was given a juvenile sentence, and he can be released as early as 25 years old. Unbelievable. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Joseph Garcia. Viewer discretion is advised. Unfortunately, yes, this is the only photograph of the young man I can find. Joseph was born in 1993, and he lived in Carlsbad, New Mexico. Joseph was described as someone who was very outdoorsy. He loved rollerblading, roller skating. He was always out at the recreational center. He loved playing sports like football and basketball, and his friends and family described him as a caring, loving individual who just really loved spending time with his friends. One of his friends was this dude, John Gamble. Joseph at the time was 15 and John was 16, and they were pretty decent friends. John seemed to kind of be the bad example of the two. In September of 2008, John would somehow convince Joseph to go with him to break into a nearby school. For what reason, I don't know. But at some point during this event, Joseph was caught outside the school. And when he was questioned later, because I guess John wasn't found out that night, well, apparently John got in trouble for it later, so he thinks that Joseph ratted him out to the police. And John didn't like that. That made him very angry. On October 12th, 2008, a body would be discovered in a remote area in Carlsbad. Not this exact area, no. It would be quickly determined to be that of 15-year-old Joseph Garcia. He had been beaten, and also he had been set on fire. Very quickly, police knew who to question first, and that was John Gamble, because he had basically publicly called out his friend for ratting him out, allegedly. They would get a warrant to search his home, and they found several pieces of evidence that connected him to the murder. And when police arrested him and began to question him, he just caved. He confessed to the murder. On the night of October 12th, 2008, there was a party going on at one of their friends' house. John had invited Joseph. He said, "I'll come pick you up and we'll go to the party." In the back of John's car was a small container of gas and a rifle. John then brought him to the secluded location and just said, "Hey, why did you rat me out?" He confronted him. He said then the two of them got into a physical altercation where John then, I guess, struck him in the head, which knocked him out. He then alleges he took the rifle and tried to shoot him, but the gun wouldn't fire, so then he kept beating him in the head with it. Not knowing if he was dead or not, he then poured gasoline on him and set him on fire. John would end up pleading guilty to the murder and was sentenced to 60 years in prison. This is him around the age of 27 when he tried to get paroled, but he was denied. Evil comes in all shapes, sizes, and colors, and children, they are not excluded whatsoever. And I don't care who hears me say it. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Elizabeth Olten. Viewer discretion is advised. At the time of this story, Elizabeth was a 9-year-old girl living in St. Martin's, Missouri. She lived with her mother, Patty. She had one brother named Anthony and a sister named Stephanie. On October 21st, 2009, Elizabeth's mom was getting dinner ready for the evening. At around 5 o'clock that evening, someone knocked on their door, and that someone turned out to be Emma Bustamante. She was a 6-year-old neighbor/friend asking if Elizabeth could come out and play. Originally, Patty said no, and that was because dinner was going to be ready soon. But then she changed her mind. She said, "You know what, that's fine. Elizabeth can go out and play with you, but she needs to be home by 6 p.m. 6 p.m. came and went, and Elizabeth was nowhere to be found. So Patty called the Bustamante house, and Emma's grandmother Karen answered the phone, and when Patty asked, "Hey, is Elizabeth there?" she said, "Elizabeth hasn't been here at all." And Emma was also home at that point. So where the hell is Elizabeth? She immediately called the police and reported Elizabeth missing. Police, of course, immediately talked to Emma. Emma was telling different stories, but eventually she told the truth. She said her and Elizabeth were playing in the woods when Emma fell into a thorn bush. Emma then called out for her sister, Alyssa Bustamante. Something just seemed off with Alyssa. And because the Bustamante children were the last people to see Elizabeth, the police got a warrant to search the Bustamante home. And they found some disturbing shit in Alyssa's room. She had a fascination with hurting people, killing people, even doing stuff to herself. There was a drawing of a person with slashes on their neck, and there was a name on that drawing. Emma, her kid sister. Alyssa fantasized about hurting or killing her own family. They found her journal, which had a whole bunch of scribbled out stuff. They were able to uncover what it said. It said, and I quote, "I just fucking killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat, and stabbed them, and now they're dead. I don't know how to feel at the moment. It felt amazing." She finished it by saying, "'Kay, I gotta go to church now." She was detained and then questioned. She would confess. She had her sister lure Elizabeth out. Emma didn't know what she was gonna do. Alyssa had pre-dug a hole days before for Elizabeth's grave, which they found in a wooded area behind their houses, here in these woods. And they found the body of Elizabeth Olten. Alyssa was charged with first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 35 years to life. It was a thrill kill. Acid and devil-worshipping and murder. This one's fun. Hell, holy shit, that's a face that not even a mother could love. God, hello, true crimerers. This is the case known as the Acid King. Yeah. Viewer discretion is advised. Pictured here, directly above me, is 17-year-old Ricky Casso. He was born into a normal family who lived in the suburbs of Long Island, New York. His father was a history teacher and also was the coach of a high school football team. And allegedly, Ricky here was on his way to becoming an all-star athlete. His dad described him as a model child. Well, wires got crossed at some point. You see, at a young age, Ricky discovered the world of drugs. He specifically became a fan of acid and LSD. He and his totally normal buddies would go to cemeteries and do angel dust. His friends would say at this point is when the devil became a bigger part of Ricky's life. They said that Ricky would dabble in devil worship. You dabble in crocheting, or maybe you dabble in cooking. Typically, a person doesn't just meander into devil worshipping and just sort of do it on the side. But Ricky did. So at one point, Ricky's parents tried to have him institutionalized, but the people at the hospital said, you know, he may be a little off, but he's not really a danger to anyone, so they let him go. This was 17-year-old Gary Lowers. He was an on-again, off-again friend of Casso. He was a runaway, and his parents really just never cared where he was. And apparently one day he stole a couple of packets of angel dust from Ricky. Ricky found out. Ricky not happy. On June 19th, 1984, Ricky, along with his 18-year-old friend James Troiano, well, they would lure Gary into the woods. All four of them would drop acid and they were tripping balls, when suddenly Ricky asked Gary to donate his clothes to the fire. Gary was like, nah. Ricky then pulled out a knife and demanded that Gary profess his love to Satan. And when Gary was like, yeah, nope, not doing that either, Ricky Casso began to stab Gary repeatedly, while still telling him to profess his love to Satan. When Gary was dead, Ricky leaned over him and began chanting something satanic. Translation, unknown. Allegedly, Ricky Casso would then tell students what happened, and they would even bring people to the body to look at it. Yeah. One of their classmates overheard this and reported them to police anonymously. Ricky and James were arrested. James ended up getting acquitted. Ricky hanged himself 2 days after his arrest. Imagine all of the fun times you've had with your best friend. Now imagine that same best friend deliberately ending your life. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Skylar Neese. Viewer discretion is advised. Skylar was born on February 10th, 1996, and she lived in Star City, West Virginia. She was doing amazing in school. She had a 4.0 grade point average. She was working at a part-time job at a restaurant, and she had a best friend that she loved dearly, Sheila Edie. They've known each other since they were both 8 years old. They were considered inseparable. And then during their freshman year in high school, they would meet Rachel Schoaf, and the three of them became a little group of best buds. But then arguments began. A lot of bickering, fighting, teenage girl stuff. Well, then Sheila and Rachel, they became kind of the new best friend duo. They became inseparable. They had a little falling out with Skylar. A big old argument that was essentially ruining the friendship. So Skylar stopped hanging out with them. On the night of July 6th, 2012, Skylar would go missing. The following morning, Skylar wasn't in her room, she wasn't in the apartment, she was gone. Just like that, just gone. Then police got involved. At first, they considered Skylar a runaway, and then there was no Amber Alert issued. Now, they would check CCTV footage of the apartment complex. Around 11 p.m. of the night that she went missing, Skylar climbed out of her bedroom window, which the parents knew she did from time to time. Skylar, pictured there, would be seen getting into this vehicle. The vehicle takes off, and then Skylar is never seen again. This is the last known image of Skylar Neese being alive. The following day after she disappeared, Sheila Edie would talk to Skylar's parents. She said that herself, Rachel, and Skylar snuck out. They drove around Star City. They were getting, And then Sheila says that they dropped Skylar off back at home, but down the road. Supposedly because Skylar didn't want to wake her parents up sneaking in. But how does dropping her off down the end of the road prevent her parents from hearing her? I don't get it. Months would go by with nothing. In November, Sheila would tweet, "No one on this earth can handle me and Rachel. If you think you can, you're wrong." Skylar's parents found that very interesting. In January 2013, Rachel Schoaf would confess to the murder of Skylar Neese, and that Sheila Edie was her accomplice. Rachel would take police to where Skylar's body was, and they found her there, here in this memorial location. In April, Sheila tweeted, "We really did go on 3. And then a month later, she turned herself in. Why did they kill her? They didn't like her anymore. And then this is what they were both sentenced to. Blood drops would turn the white snow red as two assailants fled a horrific murder. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case known as the Dartmouth Killings. Viewer discretion is advised. Pictured here is Hoff and Susanna Zantop. Both were originally from Germany, but they would actually meet while they were in the States going to Stanford University. They would get married in the 70s, and then they would both end up getting jobs at Dartmouth University. And then eventually they had two daughters. Half, H-A-L-F, by the way, that was German for the word helped. And their daughter would say that that name absolutely lived up to her father. But he taught geology and earth science, and Susanna was the chair of the German department. The couple lived in this home in Hanover, New Hampshire. The date, January 27th, 2001. And then that fateful knock on their door. Pictured here is 17-year-old Robert Tulloch and 16-year-old James Parker. They lived nearby in Chelsea, Vermont, but they were bored of Chelsea. So they said, you know what? Let's pick up and move somewhere. Somewhere exotic. Somewhere like Australia. They would come to the conclusion that they would need about $10,000 to make this plan become reality. At first, they're like, we'll probably just steal cars. Maybe we'll steal mail, see if there's checks. But that didn't work for them. So the two of them decided they're going to go to Hanover because they felt people there were wealthy. And on January 27th, 2001, they would approach the Zantop residence and knock on the door. Hoff would answer the door. He was known for his generosity and his hospitality. The two young boys posed as local students. They didn't know that they were actually professors. The two boys even pretended to be doing an environmental study, which again, pure coincidence. Hoff opened up his wallet to get a card of a colleague that might help these two boys. When he did so, the two young men noticed a whole bunch of cash in his wallet. Robert then took one of the two knives they brought with them and began to slash Hoff's face. As he screamed in agony, Susanna ran out from the kitchen, and Robert made James slash her throat, which he did. Robert then slashed the throat of Hoff. The two boys then stole whatever money they could, not $10,000 by the way. They would accidentally drop both sheaths that the knives came in, which police later tracked through sales, and they fled, leaving a blood trail. They also left behind bloody shoe prints. All of this led back to the two teenagers. They were both arrested 3 weeks later. James would admit that Robert was the ringleader, and he would confess. Both were convicted. James got 25 years. Robert got life without parole. Oh my. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Daniel LaPlante. Viewer discretion is advised. Oh, Danny boy. He was born on May 16th, 1970, in Townsend, Massachusetts. As with many of these people I talk about, he was abused as a child by his stepfather, physically and sexually. In school, he would be referred to as the creepy kid, and he spent a good portion of his youth, well, breaking into people's homes. He would steal shit, but a lot of people thought he just did it for the thrill of breaking into a house. You know, normal stuff. In 1986, he would begin to terrify a family, the Andrews family. It's believed he broke into their house and somehow got their phone number. He then started to call the Andrews phone and asked for their 15-year-old daughter, Annie. He said he got the phone number from a friend at school, and he managed to convince her to go out on a date. When they went on their date, it turns out that little Danny here had, he lied about everything, including his appearance. And then Annie would stop talking to him. Well, one night, the Andrews girls began to hear tapping on their walls. This was after they tried doing a seance in their house, so they were like, oh my god, it's ghosts. They then noticed furniture moving and objects disappearing. The tapping became louder. They went down to the basement to follow the noise, and they saw a note written in blood on the wall that says, I'm in your room, come find me. Then one day, the Andrews' father, Brian, he looked down the hallway. He saw Daniel. His face was covered in makeup and he was wearing a blonde wig and a dress that belonged to the Andrews' deceased wife and mother. It turns out that Daniel was hiding in the walls, terrorizing the family, and he was arrested. He was put in juvenile detention where he eventually got out. On December 1st, 1987, he stumbled across the Gustafson family's home. The family was Father Andrew, Mother Priscilla, and their children William and Abigail. And Priscilla was pregnant with their third child. Daniel randomly chose their home and broke into it. This was in the middle of the day and Andrew was at work. Priscilla was home with the two kids. When Andrew came home after 5 o'clock that night, he would discover the 3 dead bodies of his wife and 2 children. Priscilla was sexually assaulted, she had a pillow over her head, and she had been shot multiple times. William and Abigail had been drowned to death in 2 separate bathrooms. Daniel was known to break into homes in the area, and he was quickly arrested. He left a lot of evidence. He smiled his way through the trial. He got 3 life sentences, where he continues to rot in jail. This is a solved murder case where no one outside the courts knows the name of the victim or knows the name of the killers. Great. Hello, true crimeers. This is the case known as the Bathtub Sisters. Viewer discretion is advised. This is a younger photo of the victim of the story, and she's only referred to as Linda Anderson. This is a false name given by the author of a book that was written about her. She lived in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada with her 2 teenage girls. We can only reference the girls' names as Sandra and Beth. Again, fake names. On January 18th, 2003, the 15 and 16-year-old daughters of Linda would call police. They said they came home from a dinner with friends to find their mother drowned in their bathtub. The coroner confirmed that she did drown, but she also had massive levels of alcohol and drugs in her system, specifically high levels of Tylenol. So it was ruled an accidental death, and the case was closed. So that is today's story. Have a great rest of your night. Just kidding, no. On January 21st, 2004, a year later, the unidentified teenage daughters of Linda would be arrested, and then they would be charged with her murder. A young man would go to police to let them know that one of the teenage girls confessed to killing their mother. So, let's rewind a bit. You see, Linda had a very abusive boyfriend staying with them. He not only abused the mother, but he also at times abused the 2 girls. The 2 girls would also be sexually assaulted. Linda felt she had no escape from all of this. She was trapped. So she started drinking a lot more than usual. And in her children's eyes, she became an alcoholic. She would drive them to school or other places while drunk. But the girls also felt that they didn't have the things that other kids had. They didn't have wealthy parents. They didn't have a lot of luxuries. They really didn't even get new clothes all that often. Now, one of the girls would even confess to a priest about the sexual assaults, but nothing ever came of that. So the 2 teenage girls began to research how to kill your own mother. They bragged to friends and they planned with their friends. We're gonna do this. The friends even said, good luck. So what they did was they got their mother insanely drunk. They popped her full of Tylenol, which was meant to slow the heartbeat. They had her lay face down in the bath to give her a massage, and then they held her face underwater until she was no longer breathing. The girls then went to dinner with their friends. They celebrated, came home to call 911, and that goes back to the beginning of our story. Because of their age, they get anonymity. Their names have never been released. They can't release the name of the mother because then that would determine who the kids were. And both only got 10 years in prison. And even today, they are still anonymous. A young boy in Texas would be attacked in the woods, but he would not die from that attack for over a decade. Hello, true crimeers. This is the case of Robbie Middleton. Viewer discretion is advised. Robbie was born on June 28, 1990, and he lived in Splendora, Texas. June 28, 1998 was his 8th birthday, and he was over the moon excited for it. He loved his birthdays. He was super pumped about being able to hang out with his best friend that day. On the afternoon of June 28, 1998, he would be walking through the woods on his way to his friend's house. But sadly, he would never make it there. Several hours later, Robbie managed to stumble out of the woods and get himself to his neighborhood. He collapsed in the middle of the street. Robbie, the 8-year-old boy, was on fire. His tiny body, head to toe, was completely covered in flame. They managed to put out the fire, and he was thankfully still alive. He was rushed to the hospital where doctors said there's a very good chance he's not going to make it out of this. But a miracle happened. He survived. Sadly, he had burns to 99% of his body. The only part of his body that did not have any burns was the bottoms of his feet. It would take some time before Robbie was able to communicate, and when he finally was, he was able to identify his attacker, 13-year-old Donald Collins. Robbie alleges that Donald intervened as he was walking towards his friend's house. He dumped gasoline onto his body and then tied him to a tree and set him on fire. After the fire was started, Robbie says he also heard the voice of an adult, but to this day that adult is not known. When the ropes burned from the fire, that's when Robbie was able to escape and run away. So Donald was arrested and he went through the court process, but because there was no physical evidence and there was no known motive, unfortunately their hands were tied and they had to release him. Robbie went through life having to have 200 different surgeries, mainly skin grafts. Unfortunately, the overabundance of surgeries caused him to get a form of cancer. And in April of 2011, unfortunately, he would pass away. Just before he did, he made a confessional. 2 weeks prior to the attempted murder, Donald sexually assaulted the 8-year-old boy. So the attempted murder, that was to keep Robbie silent. It didn't work. So police finally had enough evidence to arrest him, the Hamburglar himself, right here. In the meantime, Donald had served time for sexually assaulting another 8-year-old boy. He was convicted of Robbie's murder, and he was sentenced to 40 years. "Why did you do it?" they would ask her. Her response? "I don't like Mondays. This livens up the day." Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Brenda Spencer. Viewer discretion is advised. Oh, damn thug. Brenda here was born on April 3rd, 1962. She lived in San Diego, California, my old stomping grounds. Now, her parents were separated, and she lived with her father here in this home. And it was a very unusual living situation. They shared a mattress in the living room, and the floor was just littered with alcohol bottles. Brenda got the impression that her father just didn't like her. She thought that he wanted her to unalive herself, because when she asked for a radio for a gift, he bought her a .22 caliber rifle instead. Right across the street from her home was Grover Cleveland Elementary School. Monday morning, January 29th, 1979 was no different than every other morning at the school. The kids were lined up outside waiting for the principal to open the gate. And oh my god. And then 16-year-old Brenda Spencer, armed with the .22 caliber rifle that her father got her, stood outside her home and began to open fire on the students. She managed to shoot 8 children, but none of them died, which is of course a blessing. Teachers and faculty were desperately trying to get the students away from the gunfire. Principal, 53-year-old Burton Ragg, and school custodian, 56-year-old Mike Sukar, they were both desperately trying to get students to safety when Brenda shot and killed both of them. She did not have any specific targets. She just wanted to shoot anyone she could. Now, police arrived quickly, and what they did was they got a garbage truck and they parked it directly in her line of sight, so she was not able to shoot anyone else. Then, for the next few hours, she sat in her home, barricaded herself while negotiators were trying to get her to come out. A reporter managed to get the phone number to her home, and he was the one who asked her, "Why did you do this?" "Because I don't like Mondays, and this livens up the day." Right. At one point, she said, "I'm gonna come out shooting, guns a-blazing." I think she, at that point, wanted to be shot by the cops and killed. But that didn't happen, because she managed to negotiate a free meal from Burger King, and that got her to come out, and then she was arrested. She was charged with 2 counts of murder, and was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years to life. She's aged well, huh? Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Vamp Chick. Viewer discretion is advised. Ashley Martinson was born on March 6, 1998. By the time she was about 16 or so, she ran her own blog. The blog was titled Nightmare, and she went by the name Vamp Chick. She would write about murder. She wrote poems, very dark poems, which, I can't really knock that because, this. Ashley did not get along with her birth father, so she lived with her mother. Her name was Jennifer Ayers, and she was married to Thomas Tony Ayers. Now, Tony was not exactly a nice guy. As a matter of fact, and this has been confirmed by multiple people, he was very abusive. He physically abused Jennifer, and he also physically abused his own biological daughters who also lived in the house. This was all very triggering for Ashley because it's believed she suffered from PTSD due to the fact that one of her mother's previous boyfriends had sexually abused her and just physically abused her for about 2 years. That is all according to Ashley. Tony was also an ex-convict. He'd been in jail for kidnapping before. On March 6, 2015, it was revealed that Ashley was dating a much older boy. He was 22 years old. And his name was Ryan Sisko. When the mother and stepfather found out, they were furious. The parents actually threatened to bring the law against him, which, I understand. But none of that obviously made Ashley very happy. That kind of piled onto the fact that Tony was this sort of abusive guy living in the same home as them. This all sort of just caused the pot to boil over, so to speak. On March 7th, 2015, in their home near Rhinelander, Wisconsin, sorry, I forgot to mention where this was, Ashley grabbed one of Tony's guns, which he was not legally allowed to have, but he still had several, in particular, a shotgun, because Tony was being physically abusive to Jennifer that very morning, and Ashley firmly believed he was about to kill Jennifer. So she took the shotgun and she repeatedly fired at Tony, and she killed him. And then Jennifer came into the room and a huge altercation took place. So Ashley then repeatedly stabbed her and killed her. Now, the stepfather, I get the lead up to that. But if you're doing it to protect your mother, why kill her? Ashley said it was all self-defense. Ashley would flee with her 22-year-old boyfriend, but they were caught a couple days later. The boyfriend had nothing to do with the murder. So she was charged with murder. She pled not guilty due to insanity, which again, I can kind of sympathize with to a degree. But she would eventually plead guilty to second-degree murder, and she was sentenced to 23 years in prison. Fair or not fair? Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Angela Wrightson. Viewer discretion is advised. Angela was a 39-year-old woman living in Hartlepool, which is in the United Kingdom. And by all accounts, she just had a very, very troubled life. Throughout her entire youth, she was in and out of the care system or the foster care system. She essentially became an alcoholic before she was even a teenager. She dealt with her share of loss, as even one of her boyfriends died of alcohol poisoning. On December 8th, 2014, Angela would get into a minor fight and argument with her landlord where she chucked her keys at him and then he stormed out with her keys. Now, she didn't live in the greatest of places, but she opened her home to anyone. And this included a lot of the youth in the area. More specifically, troubled youth. Angela would buy alcohol for kids who were well underage, and she would let them drink and party at her house. On the evening of December 8th, 2014, she opened her doors to two teenage girls. These two girls, who were aged 13 and 14 at the time of this case, their names have never been released. Neither have any photos of their faces ever been released. This is CCTV footage of them on the evening of the event. At any rate, they would go to Angela's house and they would have her buy alcohol for them. Pictured here is CCTV footage of Angela purchasing a bottle of alcohol. Investigators took note that she didn't look bruised or beaten or anything, which is important for what's about to happen. Some people in the UK also refer to this case as the Snapchat murders. So this is an actual Snapchat photo of the two girls who are obviously blurred out with Angela in the background. The motive for what they're about to do is unknown. The girls, for some unknown reason, began to beat Angela. They used a shovel. They used a yardstick studded with nails. They even used a television. And for 7 hours, these two unidentified girls tortured and murdered Angela. Now, these two girls were also in and out of the care system. One of them had a foster family. The other was living in a home for children. Both had experienced extreme abuse as very young children. One of them had already been arrested for assault just a couple of months prior. The next morning, the landlord would come back to return Angela's keys, and he found her dead. The two girls were caught pretty much right away and were arrested on that same day. They both were charged with murder. They both got sentenced 15 years, and both were granted lifelong anonymity, meaning their identities will never be revealed. No one will know what they specifically did. Great. In the early morning hours of October 14th, 2021, behind this door in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a family was ended. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Ethan Orton. Viewer discretion is advised. Ethan was a 17-year-old young man who lived in this home in Cedar Rapids, Iowa with his parents. His parents were 42-year-old Casey and 41-year-old Misty. Both described as absolutely lovely people. People who would do anything to help you. Misty, she loved Halloween and loved dressing up and just being silly. Misty would bring over candy to her neighbors who had children. She would also bring them desserts. In terms of Ethan here, I actually don't know much. At 2:10 a.m. on October 14th, 2021, police would be called because there was a suspicious-looking character at the front of the Orton house. When police arrived, sitting on the doorstep was Ethan Orton, and he was covered head to toe in blood. And right there on the doorsteps, he just confessed to the police officers. He said he had just killed both of his parents. Casey was stabbed to death. Misty was also stabbed many times, but Ethan claimed she was still alive, so he took an axe and finished her off. Why did he do it? Well, he told police right then and there. He said, and I quote, "I wanted to take control of my own life," end quote. Apparently he felt that his parents were too controlling of him. Most teenagers probably think that about their parents. And most don't do what Ethan did. Most will just scream into a pillow or punch a hole in a wall, throw an Xbox controller somewhere. But Ethan took it 100 steps too far. Ethan was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, and they were trying him as an adult. And I kid you not, this is what he looked like in court. He grew his hair out to cover his eyes, and his mask would cover the rest of his face. I'm getting strong Addams Family vibes here, if you know what I mean. At any rate, his lawyers had him evaluated by psychiatrists. They said, nope, he's competent, he can stand trial. While he's awaiting trial, he has a $2 million cash bond, so he'll probably never get out of jail, and he is still awaiting his trial. It should be noted that the first-degree murder count, if he gets convicted of it, which he likely will since he confessed to it, because he was a minor when he committed the crime, he can still get life in prison, but because he's a minor, he does have to have the option for parole. If he was not a minor, it would be life without parole. Again, let's reward children who knowingly committed a horrible murder. Great. And that is it for now. Imagine killing someone out of boredom. Welp. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Christopher Lane. Viewer discretion is advised. Christopher Lane was a 22-year-old who was originally from Melbourne, Australia. And he was actually in the United States in Oklahoma going to East Central University on a baseball scholarship. Just to give you some stats, he was a catcher. In his 2013 and final college season, he batted .250 with 2 RBIs and 2 stolen bases. In August of 2013, he had gone back to Australia to visit family, and then he flew back on August 14th, 2013. He was staying with his girlfriend at the time of this story, and this is in Oklahoma where he went to school. On the morning of August 16th, 2013, Chris was on his normal daily jog, when all of a sudden, in this exact location. A gunshot rang out. Chris was shot through the back, which hit both of his lungs. He collapsed to the ground. A car sped off. 911 was called, but before the ambulance got there, Chris had lost his life. I can't seem to find the connection on how this came to be, but 3 teenagers would be arrested for the murder. And this was just a couple of days after it happened. One of them, 17-year-old Michael Jones, said this: "We were bored and didn't have anything to do, so we decided to kill somebody. We did it for the fun of it." The others involved were 16-year-old Chancey Luna and 16-year-old James Edward Jr. Now, it turns out Chris Lane was their first human target that day, but the boys had actually also killed a donkey about a mile away. Again, for fun. So, the 3 boys were all charged. Michael was charged with accessory after the fact because he was actually driving the car they shot from, but he did not pull the trigger. He also agreed to testify against the other 2. Chancey Luna was the one who allegedly fired the shot. He was charged with first-degree murder. And then James Edward Jr. was charged with accessory after the fact as well. All 3 got convicted and got their own various sentences. James Edwards Jr. was actually released in 2018 with a GPS ankle monitor. Chancey got life without parole, which was later changed to that he could get parole since he was a minor at the time of the crime. Michael Jones got life with parole after 34 years, all because they were bored. Being an evil monster doesn't have an age restriction, unfortunately. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of Alicia McPhail. Viewer discretion is advised. Alicia was a 6-year-old girl living in Scotland with her family. Her father was 26-year-old Robert McPhail. This is his girlfriend, 17-year-old Tony McLaughlin. Now, on the night of July 1st, 2018, Alicia was staying with her father, who lived at his parents' house, which is on the Isle of Bute in Scotland. Alicia would be there for about 3 weeks, or at least that was the plan. Then she would go back with her mother. Well, on July 1st, 2018, they would put Alicia to bed. Now, around 11 o'clock that evening, Tony McLaughlin would peek her head in the room to see if Alicia was sleeping, and she was. By 6 a.m. the next morning, they would notice Alicia was no longer in her room. All of Alicia's belongings were there, her bike was there. She had never run away before. I mean, again, she's only 6 years old. 23 minutes later, they would report her missing. The police obviously searched the property. They searched everything around the property. So this is the Isle of Bute, or part of it, and then this is where the house was. At 8:54 that morning, they unfortunately would discover the deceased body of 6-year-old Alicia McPhail. She was completely nude, and this area was where a hotel used to be. This little girl had 117 different injuries to her body. Her private area had what they called catastrophic injuries. She was sexually assaulted, and her cause of death appeared to be smothering. This is 16-year-old Aaron Campbell. He too lived on the Isle of Bute. His own mother would come forward to police that she had CCTV footage of him leaving the house and coming back several times on the night of Alicia's murder. When she asked her son, he said, "No, I had nothing to do with it." She believed him, so she just showed the evidence to police just to be cooperative. On July 5th, 2018, he would be arrested for the murder of Alicia. Aaron only lived about a 5-minute walk away. That night, he was severely drunk, and he was looking to purchase marijuana. He tried to get a hold of Robert McPhail, who sometimes he purchased marijuana from, but Aaron got no answer. So Aaron went to the McPhail house. He broke into it with the intent of stealing some pot. When he stumbled into the little girl's room, he said all I could think about was killing her. He would be convicted of the murder, and eventually he would be sentenced to 24 years to life. Even though he's only 16, his crime was recently revealed to his fellow inmates. Oh no, your anonymity, it's broken. Hello, true crimerers. That was a fun way to say it. This is the case of Randall Mercier. Randall was a 17-year-old who lived in Apache Junction, which is located here in Arizona, where I live. On June 20th, 2008, 16-year-old Megan Rice, who was dating Randall Mercier, she picked up her boyfriend, Randall. She also had another boyfriend. Yeah, 17-year-old David Paulson. By the way, new policy on this page, we aren't showing the criminals' faces anymore. Mainly to keep this page as PG-13 as possible. Well, allegedly, David Paulson was, I guess, jealous. And Megan, I can't find her exact motive. Insanity, perhaps? You see, when Megan picked up Randall, hiding in the back of the pickup truck she was driving was David Paulson. After a few moments of driving, Megan announced some sort of code word or code phrase, which is when David ripped off the blanket he was hiding under, and then he proceeded to stab Randall 20 times. Megan, allegedly, convinced David to murder Randall. So this was completely planned. Even after being stabbed 20 times, Randall was able to escape the truck. But unfortunately, he would succumb to his wounds, and he died, alone, on the side of a road in a ditch. The murderous couple then made a really just half-assed attempt to clean the truck up of any evidence, and basically disposed of the vehicle. But they were sloppy, very sloppy. They were teenagers after all. Witnesses saw this, people heard the attack. David Paulson then fled to Salt Lake City. But don't worry, he was captured immediately. He was captured by the U.S. Marshals at the airport. Randall's family would describe him as a wonderful young man. He had moved to Ohio to help take care of his terminally ill sister before moving back to Apache Junction. His 19-year-old brother, Harold, pictured here, said that Randall had a really good head on his shoulders and he was always there to help people out. Randall would help friends fix their car whenever it broke down. He would give his clothes to people who needed clothing. David Paulson would try to claim self-defense by saying that the roles were actually reversed, saying it was Randall underneath the blanket in the truck. The jury didn't buy it. He was tried as an adult and he was sentenced to 25 years to life. Even though Megan basically orchestrated this, she only got 12 and a half years for second-degree murder. She took a deal to testify against David. 12 years. Wow. He gets no more years because of her.